You believe you are disciplined. You tell yourself you are trying. You tell yourself that you are consistent. You tell yourself that you are doing enough. But discipline does not listen to belief. It responds to action. Quiet, unseen, repeated. The ego protects your image. It tells you that you are better than your habits. It hides your inconsistency behind excuses. It softens the truth so you can avoid discomfort. But discipline is not interested in comfort. It demands precision. It exposes what you avoid. It reveals what you truly do when no one is watching. And in that moment, your ego has no place to stand. Because discipline is not about who you think you are. It is about what you prove every single day. You believe you are consistent. You remember the days you showed up, the moments you tried, the times you made effort. And you build your identity around those moments. But discipline does not measure intention. It measures repetition. What you do again and again, without interruption, without excuse. The silent mind sees the gap between what you think you do and what you actually do. This gap is where truth lives. Most people avoid looking at it because it challenges their self-image. It forces them to admit that effort is inconsistent, that focus comes and goes, that discipline appears only when it feels convenient. The ego protects against this realization. It highlights effort. It hides inconsistency. It says you are doing enough, even when you are not. This is comfortable, but it is not accurate. The dangerous mind removes this comfort. It does not rely on memory. It relies on pattern. What did you do yesterday? What did you do the day before? What did you do when you did not feel like it? These questions reveal consistency, not isolated effort. Patterns. Because discipline is not built on occasional action, it is built on uninterrupted behavior. Doing what is required whether you feel like it or not. Most people act based on mood. When motivation is high, they act. When motivation is low, they pause. This creates inconsistency. Progress starts, then stops, starts again, then fades. Nothing stabilizes, because the system is broken. Mind does not follow mood. It follows structure. A defined standard. A clear expectation. Something that is done regardless of feeling. This creates rhythm. A steady flow of action. No spikes. No long pauses. Just consistency. This is where real progress begins. Not in intensity. In repetition. The dangerous mind simplifies this. It removes complexity. It focuses on doing what must be done every day. Not perfectly, but consistently. Even small actions matter, because small actions repeated create large outcomes. Most people ignore this. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect mindset. And while they wait, nothing happens. Consistency is not perfect. It is persistent. It continues even when conditions are not ideal. Even when energy is low, even when focus is weak, you still act. This builds discipline, because you are training yourself to move without relying on emotion. The ego resists this. It wants to feel ready. It wants to feel motivated. It wants effort to match comfort. But discipline ignores this. It moves anyway. This creates conflict. You begin to see how often you stop, how often you delay, how often you justify inaction. This realization is uncomfortable, but necessary, because once you see inconsistency, you can correct it. Without awareness, nothing changes. The silent mind tracks behavior, not mentally, practically, what was done. No excuses, no distortion, just reality. This creates accountability. You cannot hide from your own pattern. You either followed through or you did not. This simplicity removes confusion. There's no overthinking, no analysis, only action, or absence of action. Over time, this builds honesty. You stop lying to yourself. You stop exaggerating effort. You stop protecting your ego. And once that happens, discipline becomes possible. Because now, you are working with truth, not illusion. Consistency also builds identity, not through belief, but through repetition. You become what you do repeatedly. If you act consistently, you become disciplined. If you act occasionally, you remain inconsistent. It is simple, but not easy, because it requires removing comfort, removing excuses, removing the need to feel ready. The dangerous mind accepts this. It does not wait. It acts, daily, quietly, without announcement, without recognition. This builds strength, not visible at first, but undeniable over time. Because consistency compounds. Each action builds on the last. Each day reinforces the pattern, until discipline becomes automatic. You no longer debate, you no longer hesitate, you act, because it is who you are. Not occasionally, consistently. This is the truth that challenges the ego. You are not as consistent as you think, but you can become consistent if you stop protecting that belief and start correcting your actions. You think you lack motivation. You say, I don't feel like doing it. You wait for the right mindset, the right energy, the right moment to begin. But that moment rarely comes, and when it does not last. Motivation is temporary. It rises quickly. It fades just as fast. It is unstable. Yet most people depend on it. They act when they feel inspired. They stop when they do not. This creates inconsistency. Progress becomes unpredictable. Some days you move forward. Other days you remain still. Nothing is sustained. Because motivation is not designed to sustain you. The silent mind understands this. It does not rely on feeling. It relies on structure, a system that functions regardless of emotion. This is discipline, doing what is required without needing to feel ready. The dangerous mind removes the dependency on motivation. It does not ask, do I feel like it? It asks, is it necessary? If the answer is yes, it acts, without delay, without negotiation. This removes hesitation, because hesitation comes from waiting for the right feeling. When feeling is removed from the decision, action becomes immediate. Most people struggle here because they have trained themselves to follow emotion. If they feel good, they work. If they feel tired, they stop. If they feel uncertain, they delay. This creates weakness, because emotion changes constantly. You cannot build consistency on something that shifts every day. Silent mind breaks this pattern. It separates action from emotion. You act first. Emotion follows. This is the reversal. Instead of waiting to feel ready, you create readiness through action. Once you begin, resistance decreases, focus improves, energy increases, but this only happens after you start. Not before. The dangerous mind knows this. It does not wait for motivation to appear. It creates momentum through movement. Small steps, repeated, without interruption. This builds rhythm, and rhythm replaces motivation, because once you are in motion, continuing becomes easier than stopping. This is how discipline works. It removes dependence on emotional states. It replaces them with consistent behavior. Motivation is unreliable. Discipline is stable. Motivation is external. Discipline is internal. Motivation fades. Discipline remains. This is the difference. Most people misunderstand effort. They believe effort should feel natural, that if something is right, it should feel easy to begin. This belief creates delay, because difficulty is interpreted as a signal to stop. The silent mind rejects this. It understands that difficulty is part of the process, not a warning. Starting when you do not feel like it is the point, because that is where discipline forms, not when it is easy, when it is not. The dangerous mind trains this daily. It does not negotiate with resistance. It moves through it, quietly, without discussion. Creates power, because you are no longer controlled by internal resistance. You act despite it. This also builds trust in yourself, because you prove that you can follow through without needing the perfect state. You become reliable, not occasionally, consistently, and consistency creates results. Not instantly, but steadily. Over time this compounds. While others wait for motivation, you move. While others hesitate, you act. While others stop, you continue. This creates separation, not through intensity, through persistence. The silent mind becomes indifferent to motivation. It does not need it, because it has something stronger. Discipline, a system that does not depend on how you feel, only on what must be done. This removes instability. Your progress no longer fluctuates with your mood. It becomes steady, predictable, reliable. This is the truth that challenges the ego. You do not lack motivation. You lack discipline. And once discipline is built, motivation becomes irrelevant. Your excuses make sense. They are well constructed. They sound reasonable. They feel justified. You explain them clearly. You tell yourself why today is not the right time, why the conditions are not ideal, why the situation is different, and the explanation feels valid because it is comfortable. But comfort is not truth. The silent mind separates the two. It sees that most excuses are not lies. They are distortions, partial truths used to avoid full responsibility. You say you are tired. That may be true. But is that the real reason you stopped? Or is it the easiest reason to accept? You say you are busy. That may also be true. But what are you busy with? What are you choosing over what matters? The dangerous mind asks these questions directly, without softening them, because it understands that excuses are not random. They follow patterns, repeated explanations that justify repeated inaction. Over time, these patterns become automatic. You do not even question them. They feel normal, logical, but logic can be misleading when it protects comfort. Most excuses are built to avoid discomfort, not to reflect reality. They give you permission to stop, to delay, to remain where you are, and because they sound reasonable, you accept them, without resistance. The silent mind does not accept easily. It examines. It looks beyond the explanation to the behavior. Did you act or did you not? This is the only measure. The result. Excuses shift focus away from action. They make you analyze instead of execute. You spend time explaining instead of doing. This creates a false sense of effort. You feel engaged, but nothing changes. The dangerous mind removes this layer. It simplifies everything. Either the task is done or it is not. No explanation changes that. This removes complexity, and with it, removes escape. You are left with a clear choice. Act or do not act. There is no middle ground. This clarity is uncomfortable, because it exposes inconsistency. It shows how often you choose not to act, not because you cannot, but because you decide not to. The ego resists this realization. It wants to protect your image. It wants to maintain the belief that you are doing enough. Excuses support this belief. They justify inaction without damaging identity. But discipline requires the opposite. It requires you to remove that protection, to see yourself accurately, without distortion, without justification. The silent mind practices honesty, not occasionally, consistently. When you do not act, you admit it, without explanation, without excuse. This builds accountability, because once you stop justifying, you start correcting. Excuses also weaken decision-making. Each time you accept one, you reinforce the pattern. You train yourself to avoid discomfort. This becomes automatic. The next time resistance appears, the excuse comes faster, stronger, more convincing, and again, you stop. This cycle continues until it becomes identity. You become someone who explains more than you execute. The dangerous mind breaks this cycle. It does not allow excuses to pass unexamined. It questions them, directly. Is this a real limitation or a preference for comfort? Is this necessary or convenient? These questions expose weakness, and once exposed, it can be addressed. This is where discipline forms. Not in easy conditions, but in moments where excuses appear. Each time you reject one, you strengthen control. Each time you accept one, you weaken it. This is constant. Every decision matters. The silent mind becomes aware of this process. It notices the moment an excuse forms, before it is spoken. before it is accepted. And in that moment, it chooses. Not based on comfort, based on standard. What is required is done, regardless of explanation. Over time, excuses lose power. They still appear, but they are no longer followed. They are seen for what they are: attempts to avoid effort, attempts to maintain comfort, and once seen clearly, they are easier to reject. This creates strength, because you are no longer controlled by internal justification. You act despite it. You move forward without needing a perfect reason. This is discipline. Direct, simple, uncompromising. The truth is uncomfortable, but they are weak. And once you stop believing them, your actions begin to change. Comfort feels harmless. It feels deserved. After effort, after stress, after difficulty, you tell yourself you need it. And sometimes you do. But most of the time, you protect it. You build your decisions around it. You choose what is easy. You avoid what is difficult. You delay what creates pressure. Not because you cannot act, but because you prefer not to feel discomfort. The silent mind sees this clearly. It understands that comfort is not neutral. It shapes behavior. Every time you choose comfort, you reinforce a pattern of avoidance, a pattern of delay, a pattern of staying where you are. This is how stagnation forms, not through failure, through comfort. The dangerous mind does not hate comfort. It does not allow comfort to become the default state. Because when comfort becomes constant, growth stops. You stop challenging yourself. You stop pushing limits. You stop developing. Everything becomes familiar, predictable, safe, and within that safety, nothing changes. Most people do not notice this. They adapt to comfort. They build routines that require minimal effort. They remove difficulty wherever possible. At first, this feels efficient, but over time, it weakens discipline, because discipline requires resistance. It requires doing what is not easy, what is not comfortable, what does not feel natural. The silent mind accepts this. It understands that discomfort is part of the process, not an obstacle. Each time you choose discomfort over comfort, you strengthen control. You train yourself to act beyond preference. This builds resilience, because you are no longer dependent on ease. You become capable in all conditions. The dangerous mind introduces discomfort deliberately, not extreme, but consistent. Waking up without delay, working without waiting for motivation, continuing when energy is low. These actions seem small, but they create a shift. You begin to rely less on feeling and more on discipline. Comfort loses influence. You are no longer guided by what feels good. You are guided by what is necessary. This creates stability. Your actions do not change based on how you feel. They remain consistent. This is strength, because most people cannot operate without comfort. When conditions become difficult, they stop. When effort increases, they hesitate. When discomfort appears, they withdraw. The silent mind does not. It continues, because it has trained itself to move through discomfort, not avoid it. Comfort also creates illusion. It makes you believe you are doing enough, because you are active within a comfortable range. But real progress exists outside that range, where effort increases, where resistance appears, where growth is required. The dangerous mind moves into this space, not once, repeatedly, because it knows that growth does not happen where things are easy. It happens where things are difficult. This requires letting go of constant comfort, not completely, but intentionally. You choose when to recover, but you do not choose comfort as your default state. This balance is important, because uncontrolled comfort leads to weakness, and controlled discomfort builds strength. The silent mind maintains this balance. It does not drift into ease. It stays aware. Each choice is examined. Is this necessary, or is this comfort disguised as necessity? This question reveals truth. and truth guides action. Over time, your tolerance changes. What once felt difficult becomes manageable. What once felt uncomfortable becomes normal. You expand your capacity. This is how strength develops, gradually, through repeated exposure to discomfort. Not extreme effort, consistent effort. The dangerous mind understands that comfort is not the enemy itself. Uncontrolled comfort is. Because it limits growth, it reduces discipline, it weakens resilience, and most importantly, it keeps you where you are. The silent mind refuses this. It chooses growth over ease, effort over comfort, progress over convenience, even when it is difficult, especially when it is difficult. This is the truth that challenges the ego. You are not held back by lack of ability. You are held back by the comfort you protect. And once you stop protecting it, you wait. Not always consciously, but you expect something. A moment, a signal, a push, something that will force you to act. You believe that when pressure arrives, you will respond. When urgency appears, you will move. When someone demands more from you, you will rise. But most of the time, nothing comes. No one arrives to correct you. No one arrives to guide you. No one arrives to push you forward. And in that absence, you remain where you are. The silent mind understands this reality. It does not wait for external pressure. It creates internal pressure, not through stress, through standards, clear expectations that must be met regardless of circumstances. Most people rely on external structure, deadlines, supervision, accountability from others. When these are present, they perform. When they are removed, they slow down. They lose direction, because their discipline is dependent on being watched. This is fragile, because once the structure disappears, so does the effort. The dangerous mind removes this dependency. It becomes self-directed. It does not need to be told what to do. It does not need to be reminded to act. It does not need pressure to begin. It moves independently, because it understands a simple truth. No one is responsible for your progress except you. This is not harsh. It is accurate. And once accepted, it changes everything. You stop waiting. You stop expecting support. You stop relying on external force. Begin to act because it is necessary, not because someone is watching. This creates freedom, because your progress is no longer tied to external conditions. You are not delayed by absence. You are not limited by lack of structure. You create your own. The silent mind builds systems. Simple, clear, repeatable. What needs to be done is defined, and then it is executed. Daily, without negotiation. This removes hesitation, because there is no decision to make each time. The decision has already been made. You follow the system. This creates consistency, and consistency builds discipline. Most people struggle because they decide every day whether to act. This creates instability. Some days they choose to move, other days they choose to stop. The pattern breaks. Progress slows. The dangerous mind removes daily decisions. It commits once, then follows through. This eliminates uncertainty. You are not asking if you should act. You are executing what you already decided. This is powerful, because it removes the influence of mood. You act regardless of feeling, regardless of energy, regardless of circumstance. This creates reliability. You become consistent not because it is easy, but because it is defined. The silent mind also accepts the absence of recognition. No applause, no validation, no immediate reward. This is where most people stop, because they expect feedback. They expect acknowledgement. When it does not come, they lose motivation. They slow down their effort. The dangerous mind expects nothing. It does not work for recognition. It works for progress. This removes dependency on external response. You continue even when no one notices, even when no one cares. Because the purpose is not attention, it is development. This creates resilience, because your effort is not influenced by external reaction. You are steady, focused, uninterrupted. Over time, this creates separation. While others wait, you move. While others hesitate, you act. While others depend on pressure, you create your own. This builds momentum, and momentum creates results. Not instantly. The silent mind understands that waiting is a trap. It delays action. It creates false hope that something will change without effort. But nothing changes without action. And action must come from you, not from others, not from circumstances, not from external force, from you. This is the truth that removes illusion. No one is coming to push you. No one is coming to save you. No one is coming to build what only you can build. And once you accept this, you stop waiting. You stop depending. You stop delaying. You begin. Quietly. Consistently. Independently. And in that independence, you become stronger than those who are still waiting. You carry an image of yourself, carefully built, refined over time. You believe you are focused. You believe you are disciplined. You believe you are committed. This image feels real because you repeat it internally. You reinforce it through intention, through what you plan to do, through what you say you will become. But discipline does not recognize intention. It recognizes behavior. What you actually do, repeatedly, without interruption. The silent mind sees the difference between identity and action, between who you think you are and what your habits prove. This gap is uncomfortable because it challenges your self-image. It forces you to confront a version of yourself that is less consistent than you believe. The ego resists this. It protects the image. It tells you that you are close, that you are improving, that you are doing enough, even when your actions do not match your claims. This protection feels safe, but it prevents change, because you cannot improve while defending an illusion. The dangerous mind removes this defense. It lets the image break, completely, not partially. It stops identifying with what it wants to be, and focuses only on what it does. This shift is critical, because discipline is not built through belief, it is built through alignment. Your actions must match your standards. If they do not, the standard must be enforced, not adjusted. Most people adjust the standard. They lower it to match their behavior, so they can maintain the image. This creates stagnation, because nothing improves. The silent mind does the opposite. It raises awareness. It sees the gap clearly, and instead of protecting the image, it corrects the behavior. This is difficult, because it requires honesty. Direct, unfiltered honesty. You admit inconsistency. You admit delay. You admit avoidance. Without justification, without explanation. This removes illusion. And once illusion is removed, change becomes possible. Discipline demands this level of truth, because without it, you are building on something false. And anything built on false identity will collapse. The dangerous mind builds on reality, even if that reality is uncomfortable, especially if it is uncomfortable. Because discomfort reveals what needs to change. Letting go of who you pretend to be also removes pressure. The pressure to maintain an image, to appear consistent, to appear strong. This pressure creates conflict. You are trying to protect something that is not fully real, and this drains energy. The silent mind removes this burden. It does not try to appear disciplined. It focuses on becoming disciplined, quietly, without display, without declaration. This creates authenticity. Your actions speak for you, not your claims, not your intentions, just your behavior. Over time, this builds a new identity, not imagined, proven. You do not need to tell yourself who you are. You know, because you see it in what you do daily. Consistency replaces belief. Action replaces intention. Reality replaces illusion. This is where discipline becomes stable, because it is no longer dependent on how you see yourself. It is based on what you do, repeatedly, without fail. The dangerous mind understands that identity must be earned. Not assumed, not declared, earned through action. And once it is earned, it becomes unshakable, because it is built on proof, not perception. Letting go of the false image is not loss, it is correction. It removes what is weak so something stronger can be built. This process is not quick. It requires consistency, awareness, discipline. But over time, the difference becomes clear. You no longer rely on who you think you are. You rely on what you have proven. This creates confidence, not based on belief, but based on evidence. And evidence cannot be easily shaken, because it is real. This is the final truth. Discipline requires you to let go of who you pretend to be, so you can become who your actions prove you are.